Have you heard? Frugality is back in style and all the cool kids are saving money. Hi, I'm Hope.
And I'm Larry.
From Under the Median. Every week on this channel, we talk about practical frugality and frugality in and of itself and the reasons that people save money, current trends in saving money, and if that trend is going to continue. We're talking about all of it today on the program. But if frugality in general and living with a spirit of joy and abundance on a budget are interesting to you, you're going to want to make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. So I am going to start off by saying this is a totally fascinating topic for me. Simple reasons why people right now are embracing frugality, and frugality is all of a sudden a really cool thing to do.
It's really in vogue.
Now, let's start out with a little bit of statistics. Currently, 6 in 10 Americans, when faced with a $400 unexpected expense, cannot meet that expense. They either have to sell something or they need to ask friends or family or a bank for a loan.
Nearly 8 in 10 Americans live paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah, so those are the grim statistics. But here's some good news. The savings rate is up in America. There are reasons why it's up. We're going to talk about that on the program, and we're going to kind of let you know whether we think or hope that the savings rate is going to continue to go up. Now, for years, we were the people, do you remember this? People would find out how we were living, even friends, and would say, I admire you so much, but I could never live like that. We were definitely not the cool kids on the block.
No, we were the exception, but maybe we weren't exceptional in their eyes.
No, perhaps not.
I think maybe we could be classified as the weird people.
Yes. So, but what they didn't understand is like there was a method to our madness. There was a reason why we were doing every specific cost-saving measure that we were taking. It wasn't just that we were saving money aimlessly. We had reasons for doing what we were doing. For instance,
we make every penny count.
We always have. And the reason that we made every penny count was because we had great big goals.
Yes.
And we were determined to meet those goals. Now, if you have some goals and you're thinking, boy, I would really love to meet some goals, we have a free resource for you. And that's part of the reason I brought this up, is because we would love to send you a set of free goal trackers. If you are among those people who are thinking, I've got some goals, I really want to make some progress on them, we want to send the goal trackers to you. And there is a link where you can request that free resource in the description of this video. Frugality, guys, is not about deprivation. And we talk about that a lot on this channel. Frugality is all about choosing when, where, and how you will spend your money. And that's one of the reasons when we said, you know what, we are choosing not to eat out. But we are not choosing to not connect with our children. Instead, we're finding a different way to do it and a meaningful way to do it. And we're going to go on picnics every single Friday night. So we found something to substitute instead of going out to eat. And that is the heart of frugality.
I think living frugal takes a lot of precision. I could kind of compare this to the old cars that used a carburetor. A carburetor was kind of sloppy. It put a certain amount of fuel in, it kind of sprayed it in there. It wasn't very efficient. But then they came out with fuel injection. Fuel injection was much more precise. It had an exact amount. And when you're living frugally, you're kind of doing the same thing as the fuel injection system in your car is doing. You're very precise and exacting about how you're spending your money. And it's more efficient, therefore.
I really like that.
Thanks.
So as we delve into why frugality is suddenly popular, what we want to start out is by looking at other periods in American history when frugality saw a surge. And we're going to see if we can find any correlations between when frugality has been popular before and why it is popular now. Now, what I really like about this part is I got to do research for this program.
She just loves research.
Yep, I love doing research. Now, Larry limited me to the number of charts that I can show you on this program. I want you to understand that. So I chose the ones that are most interesting and show very precisely what I am talking about. So the first chart that you're looking at right now shows the average savings rate per American from 1929 to 2009. And when we look at that, we can say very clearly that there were some dips and there were some times when frugality was in vogue and people began saving money. And of course, that first dip is that horrible time known as the Great Depression. But then you notice that during World War II, those last 3 years of World War II, from 1943 to 1945, savings rates went up massively. And then once again, you see it have some dips and flows. You have the Arab oil embargo in the United States from 1973 to 75. Right after that, you see the savings rate goes up. And then right before the housing crisis, I just want to point this out because the housing crisis in the United States was 2008, the two absolute worst years for personal savings took place literally right before the housing crisis of 2008. You had the lowest savings rates since the Great Depression. And you had savings rates of 0.4% in 2005, and it was even lower than that in 2006. And so immediately there's a crisis and the savings rate goes up. So what is my point? My point is that our savings and our spending generally stays in something called stasis. Now, when you're talking about stasis, what that means is something is stable. It just remains sitting still. So when we are spending money, we tend to just keep those same spending patterns over and over and over again until something happens that breaks us out of those patterns. So if we look at it from a scientific point of view.
Oh, let's do.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. So if we look at it from a scientific point of view, we learned that when an object is in stasis, when it's standing still, and something needs to act on it to get it into movement, you need a pretty strong force. If something is already in movement, it doesn't take as much to move it forward. But if it's standing still, you need a stronger force to act against that stability to make it move. And that's what happens. So whenever something happens economically, that dips the economy, you immediately see the personal savings rate go up dramatically.
You know, I see this as, you know how in the old cartoons, they'd have TNT and they'd pull that switch down, it would blow up. Sometimes it takes something like that to get us moving. It takes that much force. So you're showing some historical events that caused and forced us to make fast, dramatic changes.
Right, and it did.
Yeah.
So the question, I know on everybody's mind, is did that happen when the pandemic hit? And the answer is yes. So the savings rate before the pandemic was around 7.2%. In the midst of the pandemic, in May of 2020, the savings rate was at 33%.
Holy cow, that is a lot of savings.
Now that's understandable because everything was shut down.
There was nowhere to put the money.
Right, exactly. So it did go down after that. But the good news is, guys, there's good news in here, is that the personal savings rate right now is up a little over 2 percentage points, even after the pandemic has swelled down. So our hope is that personal savings rate will continue and will maybe even go on an upward trajectory. What that shows us, in short, thank you for hanging out with my geekiness, guys, is that in times of crisis, personal savings goes up. We just went through a crisis, a worldwide crisis, and personal savings did indeed go up. So right now, saving money, living frugally, definitely in vogue. So today we want to share 4 simple reasons why we believe that frugality is back in fashion and why we hope that it continues to be in fashion. Now, this is a conversation, guys, and we would love to have you interact with us and dialogue with us in the comment section of the video and tell us, what do you think about what we're sharing? Do you think we're right? Do you think we're wrong? And are there any other factors that you see as contributing to the current status of popularity of frugality. All right, Larry, take it away. Number one.
Okay, the number one item is rethinking our priorities. And, we had a shutdown here a little over a year ago, and we didn't have anywhere to go to spend our money. So there was an item that caused us to, kind of forced us to save. If you can't spend your money, what are you going to do? You're going to put it in the bank, right? Another example would be a crisis. When you have a crisis occur, then you rethink your priorities. I had a heart condition about 3 years ago now. That caused us to rethink how much we were going to save, how much we were going to plan for health care, insurance, retirement. It all kind of worked together on that one.
And how much overtime you were going to continue to work. That was this huge topic of, you know what, life is too short. We're going to cut back on overtime. And so we did.
I did. I cut back at least half on that.
Yeah, and we don't regret it.
No. And then there was there's been some panics. Now the COVID also caused some panic buying. That's where you had all those empty shelves and all the toilet paper was gone. And it was funny how the paper towels, the paper products were gone. You couldn't get any sanitizer. It was strange. And that was all driven by a crisis.
Just the whole thing of walking into the grocery store and seeing this surreal scene of completely empty shelves and knowing no more was coming to replace those empty shelves. It was jarring.
It was
absolutely jarring.
It was so eerie to see empty shelves.
So the second reason why we think that people are really embracing frugality right now is that they have had an opportunity to decide what matters most.
I see this in the millennials especially. They're seeing that the generations before them were all caught up in this buying and all the things that we have and all this commercialism, and they're getting wise to the fact that does not necessarily bring happiness. So they're finding different ways to explore their lifestyles, and a lot of it has to do with living frugally and saving.
You know what we noticed, and it was so interesting to watch during the shutdown, and part of this sort of figuring out what matters most is what Larry just mentioned, is you have this incredible push in the last 20 or 30 years toward consumerism, and then you have a younger generation pushing back against that, saying, I don't want to embrace that, thank you very much. And so that was not driven by a pandemic. But what you did see during the pandemic across the board was you saw this increased sense of community. Even though people couldn't go places, they couldn't be more than 6 feet from each other, they had to wear masks, you saw things like pop-up concerts in people's driveways. You would sit, and I remember taking a walk in our neighborhood, and they were having this most delightful concert in their driveway. This band was playing, and you could hear it for a block or two away, and it was like you felt it. It was almost something you could physically feel, this feeling of people saying, we have community and we have connectedness no matter what, and more importantly, right now when we really need it, we are finding ways to find that.
And there were people out walking, they were exercising. When I was riding my bike on the trail, which I do all the time, and I do it regardless of what we're going through, I saw so many people out. And the parks were full. It was amazing. Of course, a lot of people couldn't go to work back in those days. And so there were some things that were causing that.
Absolutely.
But it caused a change in lifestyle, and I think they were maybe rethinking what really was important to them.
So I think as a whole, our society is making some really important decisions about what they value most. And I think that is driving this need for frugality, and this desire for frugality is they figured out what they value, and they're like, you know what, if I need to embrace frugality a little more to get what I want, then I'm all in. I'm all in. All right, what is the next thing that we think is one of the reasons behind the fact that frugality is now a way cool thing to do?
I'm just fascinated by the minimalist movement.
Is. Oh my gosh, you guys.
I watch hours and hours of tiny house videos that are on YouTube.
Yes, he does.
And now we don't live like that. I just want to preface that. We are not minimalists. But I so admire this lifestyle of getting rid of the big job, maybe the 5-figure job that they had, and buying a home that's very affordable, they can pay cash for. Many of them build them themselves. They design it themselves. They spend a lot of time and effort, and they get what they want, and they're just absolutely delighted. They have a lot of spare time. They might make a garden. In American money, they may spend, a lot of these are less than $100,000, and a lot of them are even down into the $30,000 range, depending on what they put into it. But you get a nice lot somewhere that's real scenic. You're back to nature. I think they feel like they can breathe again, and they don't have a lot of stuff. They have just what they need, just a certain amount of clothing, a certain amount of articles, everyday use articles. And I really think they're onto something.
I do too. Are any of you minimalists? We would love to know whether you are minimalists and watching us.
Or do any of you live in a tiny house? I would love to know that.
He wants to come visit you, I'm just saying. But, see, here's the thing. This whole minimalist movement is being driven by millennials, by people that are basically half our age.
Yeah.
And we feel like we are learning so much from you. If you are a minimalist, we are like, oh my gosh, we are like eating up this whole idea of owning less, because we're at a point in our life where we don't want all the stuff that we've collected over 33 years. And more importantly, our kids don't want all the stuff that we've collected over 33 years. Mm-mm. So as we go through our belongings, it is becoming easier and easier and easier to just let go and say, no, don't want it anymore. And I love that. Minimalism really focuses on 4 super important things, Larry.
Well, the first thing is purchasing quality.
Yeah.
Now, they'll put some really high quality shelving units into these homes. They'll buy backpacking, hiking equipment, camera equipment, computers, but they buy top end, but they only have a little of it.
Right.
So they can afford to do that. The other thing is that they're very thoughtful about what they purchase. They put a lot of thought in it, just like that fuel injection that I was talking about. They spend more time really thinking, do I need that item? Am I going to really use that item? And I don't think they're concerned about whether that item is going to make them happy, because either you're happy or you're not. An item isn't going to get you any happier.
Yeah, that's it. I think they have redefined happiness and contentment too. So I think they've realized this stuff is not going to make me happy. Yeah, that's very impressive.
Their level of contentment is based on sitting on their porch patio and watching the wildlife.
Yeah, drinking a cup of tea or something.
Yeah, and watching the clouds roll over the mountains and that kind of stuff. Yeah, so, I could go for that.
So everything they buy really serves a purpose in their life, and it's not going to fill a purpose, then they don't see the need in buying it. They've really turned their back on this whole idea of consumerism, and I absolutely love it. And part of the reason I love it is because, number one, it is teaching us a lot. As an older couple, honestly, it's teaching us so much at this point in our lives. But the second reason we really love it is because it's allowing us to see where this whole idea of minimalism, it intersects beautifully with frugality.
It does.
We talk about these things on the channel. We've talked about the differences between being frugal and being cheap. They're not the same thing at all. In fact, we did a video on it. If you want to see the video, I'll link it up above and in the description of the video. This whole video we did on the differences between being frugal and being cheap. Minimalists are not cheap, but they are frugal. And so they embrace so many of these things that we are teaching. So hopefully, they're learning some things from us as well.
Yeah, many of the items that they'll put into these homes, they've either repurposed from an old barn. They'll use barn siding for their own siding. They'll put a lot of used or discarded items. They'll refurbish it, refinish it, reshape it, cut it, saw it, whatever they need to do. Get old windows and make them work. And it'll be a work of art and a thing of beauty when they get done with it. And they're so proud of what they have because of all the work and thoughtful planning that they've done, not just with their home, but with their lives.
So this whole idea of this spirit of reusing things and DIYing, that really segues into our last reason why we really believe that frugality is on top right now, and we believe it's going to be there to stay. And that is the fact of what we talked about, where minimalists are teaching us some things, but we really feel like the minimalist movement is looking back as they look forward to moving forward in their lives and what they want to take with them moving forward. I think they're looking back and they're hearkening to this day and age that has not been seen for a long time, of looking back into those skills that their parents and grandparents actually had, and some of the skills that older people can now teach younger people.
Well, I think you can even go back as far as some of the pioneers that were coming across the United States in the middle and late 1800s that were homesteaders. And this is how homesteaders lived. They made what they needed. They raised their own food. They were survivalists. And I think that's kind of what the minimalist tiny house people are doing, the very same concept.
So in this whole idea of seeking advice and seeking to look back to what our elders have been through, which is our fourth point, I really think that we have to remember that. So Larry's parents went through the Great Depression. And when we first married, and instantly when like things started to go wrong, I was like, Mom, we take 2 steps forward, we go 1 step back. And she was like, that's life. And so just sharing those stories with me of it's going to be okay, and let's problem solve. Let's not sit thinking, oh gosh, everything's going to go bad and it's going to stay bad. Let's problem solve, and I'm going to teach you how to do that. We learned so many skills, so many life skills from Larry's parents, but it was because they had been through so many difficulties and through so many recessions that nothing threw them for a loop.
You know, my dad was in high school during the worst of the Depression. So the Depression, basically, you're talking 1929 to 1933. Well, he graduated from high school in 1933.
Yeah.
So those were the years he spent in high school. Do you know he had a car in high school? His dad found him a $10 Model T.
That's right.
And they bought one more for a few dollars, maybe a couple dollars for parts. And Dad drove a car during the Depression. Isn't that amazing? They lived on a farm. They raised their own food. They actually lived pretty good. I think my grandfather, his dad, lost a little money in their savings account. Was about it. And then my mom would have been in grade school during the Depression. And, you know, they don't remember it as being such a horrible situation living on farms as those that lived in cities. What were the Depression years like for your families growing up?
We had plenty to eat. But like Calvin was saying, we didn't have much money because there wasn't much money around. But we was very fortunate that we didn't lose the farm we were on, and we did have plenty to eat, but you didn't get much for anything. And we raised putting all the vegetables we need. About all we bought at the grocery store was the staples like flour, sugar, and things like spices, things like that.
But they had to make a lot of adjustments. And they modeled those adjustments the rest of their lives. They kept those same lifestyle savings that they learned back in those days. So they were a valuable resource for Hope and I.
Absolutely. So I think just that whole opportunity to learn from people who are older than you, I think that's fueling the frugality movement currently, is then not only are we learning from them, but I think they're also looking back and they're learning things from us. Now, we have not, clearly we didn't go through the Great Depression, but we did go through the oil embargo of the 1970s. And in America, there were a lot of, parallels we kind of saw come up again during the pandemic. A lot of scary things.
I was first driving when that happened. I started driving in 1973. I was 16. And the oil embargo happened shortly after I got my driver's license. It did not keep me from driving, however. The worst thing about that was the speed limit going down from 65 to 55 on your state roads and 70 to 55 on the interstates. That was awful. But it did affect large cities. It really affected them.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there was a spike in savings through that time period. But that was not nearly as impactful as the Great Depression, not at all.
I do remember, so I'm 7 years younger than Larry, so I was in grade school during the 73 to 75. But I remember my mother, inflation was horrible. And I remember her going to the grocery store and saying, every time I walk in the grocery store, the prices have gone up. And when just recently, I was in the grocery store and I said, every time I walk in the grocery store, the prices have gone up. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is like a weird repeat of history. And that's the thing. Look, it all goes in cycles. And right now we've been through a really hard cycle and savings are up. And we're hoping that there are some really important lessons that have been learned, that people will continue that savings rate and frugality will still stay on top of the pack and it will still continue to be a popular thing to do. So what do you think? Has frugality come of age? Is it back in style? Are all the cool kids saving money? And why do you think that that is happening? What are the reasons you think that frugality is back in vogue? Let us know in the comments section of this video. And one more reminder before we take off today, if you're one of those people that's trying to reach great big goals, we want to help you do that. So we have set of free goal trackers, and there is a link to those free goal trackers. All you got to do is request them. There's a link in the description of the video. We'll see you next week.
You're looking at a 1936 Kodak projector. This is a 16 millimeter silent projector that they sold during the Depression. So back then, if you wanted to have home movies, this was the item that you would use.